Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Angela McIver. She is joining us from Trapezium Math to talk about the importance of learning math. Before Angela joins us, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Power of Kindness Through the Eyes of Children, a great picture book written by our friend Ruth Malley. Ruth has been a guest on the show a couple of times. Both of her books have been named Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Reads. The Power of Kindness is a stunning children's picture book that aims to encourage young children to be kind and compassionate towards each other. It allows kids to see how even the smallest actions of kindness can have ripple effects which bring positivity and light to our community. Your kids are going to love the main character, Orbit. With the help of Orbit, we get a look at what kindness is from the perspective of young children. Ruth Malley was inspired to write this book after she asked the children in her daycare center about kindness and where they felt kindness in their lives. You're going to love this beautiful follow-up book to the fabulous The Power of Positivity. The Power of Kindness by Ruth Malley is available on Amazon. Joining us right now from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Our guest today is here to talk to us about the importance of mathematics. I can't wait. Please welcome to the show, Angela McIver. Hey, Angela, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and I'm really excited for you to tell me how much fun math can be.
Oh, my goodness. I could talk for ages about that. I always say that here in America, we have been traumatized by math. I meet parents all the time that are like, I don't do math. And so my whole goal has been to make math a joyful, confidence-building experience for children and their parents and their teachers, believe it or not. Many elementary math teachers also have been traumatized by their math experiences here. And that has been my passion and my mission for the past 15 years.
So you've created something called Trapezium Math. Now, you're telling me that's an online math club?
Absolutely. Yes, it's an online math club. Pre-pandemic, it was not an online math club. It was a math club that parents sent their kids to in a brick-and-mortar store. But since the pandemic, we've moved online, and we've really focused on how do you create an online math program for students that is as technology-free as possible. And so our online math club students receive a kit, and they use that kit for all of the math that we do with them online. Our clubs have 4 students and 1 club leader. And they are really engaging and out of your seat kinds of activities. We want kids to see math as something that, 1, they can do, but 2, that is really powerful as a problem-solving tool, that if they can embrace math, they can do anything. And that's our goal.
There's been so many, you mentioned that people here in the United States, teachers, kids, parents have been traumatized by math. And that's certainly something I can relate to. Not so much, math, I went from a really kind of fun, open, very progressive, do learn what you want to learn at your pace kind of public school, and went into a very traditional college prep Jesuit high school. So
Yeah.
I got beaten over the head by every subject when I got to high school. But I remember my son in middle school, and he was a math genius, and he did everything in his head. And, so he would get the problem, and he would just go down and 52, 35, and the teacher would come back and mark everything wrong because they didn't see his work.
Yeah.
And I would sit down, I'm like, but is it right? And they're like, yeah, it's right, but I got to see the work to make sure he did it right. And I'm like, it's right.
I can understand that, especially at the younger grades. So, in the early grades in elementary school, unfortunately, the way curriculum is designed in our elementary schools, it undoes skills and mastery that we want to happen. So, for instance, one of the things that we want kids to develop that's essential, and you can ask any algebra teacher this, the number one thing they want kids to have is this ability to do math in their heads in this very fluent way, automatic, right? But in the in the elementary schools, they often ask kids to explain how they got, a very fairly simple answer that could be done in their head. So what they are doing is undoing. They're taking apart this automaticity that kids are developing, and they're not valuing that automaticity. And it really is detrimental for children as they move up in elementary school and go to middle school. So I completely understand, and I, have had parents share that experience. You hear that all the time. And I have to say, especially in the lower grades, one of our goals is for children to have that kind of automatic see it, know it, like they are expected to have with sight word recognition. Mm-hmm. So you hear teachers say all the time, these are your sight words. You just need to see it and know it. You just need to see it and know it. Mm-hmm. You don't need to break it apart. You don't need to, sound it out. You need to be able to look at it and know what it is. There is a corollary in math, and elementary schools have missed that in their whole reform. And so, yes, I hear that.
Yeah. And now, one of the things, I kind of miss this. My kids are now 25 and 29, but I'm understanding, as you were talking, that we're teaching math in a completely different way, where when I was a kid, and even when my kids are in school and they were adding 13 plus 10 together, they would put them in columns, and you don't do that anymore. You turn 10 into two fives and 15 or 13 into, it just blows my mind.
Right. In theory, and I say this all the time because I say I went to graduate school, got my PhD. I say I drank the Kool-Aid. So in theory, I understand the whole rationale behind that. But when you start to peel back, what is it that we need to prepare students for? My area of focus is elementary school. We want to prepare kids for middle school and high school math. You need to look at what is in middle school and high school math to, see if we are kind of going on the right path. So one of the challenges is that students, like you said, are not learning or not mastering the traditional algorithms. Those are, some kids call it stacking, like if you're doing addition and subtraction, you stack the numbers. And they're not learning long division at all. That is just touched on. But if you were to go and pull out middle school and high school algebra textbooks, kids are being confronted with these same algorithms, but they are algebraic, equations that are set up adding, and doing polynomial long division. So if a child has not mastered the basic algorithm, then when they get to, this is where things fall apart for kids, and parents think that's falling apart because of the algebra. And I'm like, no, it's falling apart because they didn't get the foundation in elementary school. The algebra, actually, when you sit down and talk with kids about algebra and have them do algebra problems, it's actually very intuitive and makes a lot of sense. Where kids fall apart is that they don't have this foundation. And one of the challenges is that the curriculum that we are using in our elementary schools fails to develop the mastery that's needed for these. Now, again, in theory, I believe all that is said about students needing conceptual understanding and students needing to be able to reason. I 100% am there, but I think in many cases they threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah. I can relate to that because one of the issues I had when I went to that traditional high school was when I learned how to write and read, I didn't learn English grammar. And so I can write a sentence, I can write a book, I've written a book, but I couldn't break down a sentence. I couldn't, I could tell you what a noun was, but all those past participles and all that stuff. So when I get to high school and I had to take Latin, it was like, huh? And, and my teacher, he was a beautiful man. He said to me, he had so much empathy for me. He said, he would sit down with my mom and he says he knows his vocabulary. He's doing the work. I know he's working hard, but he's never going to be able to get this because he doesn't have that basic foundation.
Yeah. And it's hard, because you don't want kids doing rote kind of exercises and these kind of really tedious, soul-crushing worksheets after time, but there absolutely needs to be some balance in terms of developing skill.
So let's talk about how you've turned math, which lots of folks find intimidating, a lot of folks find tedious, and you turned it into a club, fun.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
As a child, I realized that I was doing math all the time or trying to solve math problems all the time. I remember getting a stopwatch, and whenever we were in the car, I was in the car with my mother, I just wanted to find out, how long are the traffic lights and how long does it take to get from here to here and what is the best route? And I was going through all of these things. This was before, kids don't realize watching TV when you couldn't pause, trying to figure out how long are the commercial breaks. And I discovered, I would take these things down and I discovered that, the second commercial break in the 30-minute program is the longest one. So I would tell my family, that's when you go to the bathroom. That's the second, so I was always thinking mathematically. And I think like you, by the time I got to high school, I was confronted with a math that seemed completely disconnected from the ways that I thought. And I wanted to create a program for kids that connected math to all of these really cool things that they might be thinking about or experiencing or trying to figure out. And also wanting to develop that fluency and automaticity that I talked about earlier in ways that don't require you to do minute math drills, which seems to be the only way that schools work on developing this math automaticity. So, one of the easiest ways to develop math fluency and automaticity is teach kids math magic, to teach them magic tricks that involve math. And so we started a club that started just doing these kind of things, doing math magic tricks where they had to develop this strong mental math to be able to do these problems and impress people. And I would tell kids as I started doing these math tricks, I was like, if it takes you 5 minutes to figure this out, that's not a trick, right? It's not impressive. You have to do it in 10 seconds or less. And so kids were very motivated to get really fast and good with doing these kind of math tricks. And, that just it just kind of snowballed into what are other ways that we can get kids to want to do math. When children start reading, they want to read, and they read things when they're in the grocery store. They just start reading naturally. And I was like, how do we get kids to start doing math naturally, right, as they're, going out and about in their world? And so I have an amazing staff, and we've just spent years coming up with activities and lessons that get kids excited about math and have them kind of take that outside of the classroom. The difference between math and reading is that kids learn reading, they learn reading in school, but they leave the classroom and they continue reading. Kids do math in school, they leave the classroom and they don't do any math. And so our goal was, let's get kids doing math outside of the classroom.
Yeah. And, one of the things that obviously Reading with Your Kids podcast, we so celebrate that whole idea of reading with your kids. And we know that one of the reasons kids fall in love with reading is that they're doing it on the laps of the person that's most important in their life. And it creates this loving memory of, this is so cool. Are there ways that we can kind of replicate that with math?
100%.
Awesome.
There are. Except, one of the things is that we have to get parents comfortable with doing math with their kids. And parents, again, like I said, we found a study that surveyed parents, and they found that parents would rather talk to their children about sex and drugs than help them with their math homework. That's how much parents don't want to do math. And so, it's a problem that we really need to address in this country. So there are so many ways that you can incorporate math with your children. That's a lot of fun. And but I can share just a few that I always did, my husband and I always did with our kids when we would go out to a restaurant, and our kids, as soon as we go to a restaurant and they got the menu, they would be scanning it and looking at the prices. So as soon as we go to a restaurant for dinner, before we open up the bill at the end, everyone has to write down how much they think it cost, right? And so they write on a piece of paper, and the person who's closest wins. They don't win anything. It's just they win. Right. There's nothing to pay. But it became something, and my kids were like, wait, you got you got the extra French fries. They're trying to calculate it, and they have to do it all in their head, and they write it down. And as they got older, when they got into middle school, we would say, you have to include tax and tip, tip is 20%, tax 8%, you have to include tax and tip. And it just became something that our kids looked forward to doing when we went out to dinner, and they got really good at it, and, started understanding things. As they got older, they understood, how do you calculate a tip? And they understood how do you calculate taxes, and they started to understand that piece. So that's one really fun way that you can do math with your children. Just start incorporating these ways of doing math with your kids.
Yeah, that's such a game. I'm always blown away when I'm in a restaurant and I see people bring out the calculator, bring out the phone, and figure out the tip. I'm like, this is really easy, Matthew. Really.
Right. And now you don't have to do that because now they just put it on the thing. And I'm like, why are you doing that? We could, there's an easy way. But I understand. Collectively, we've been traumatized, and so I completely get it when people feel stressed about that.
One of the things that we talk about when we talk about the benefits of reading is that there are all these really clear benefits. When you read with your kids, they obviously learn how to read. They're hearing words that they wouldn't normally hear, and they also develop things like empathy and comprehension. What kind of additional benefits, other than just learning how to do math, what kind of additional benefits do kids get when they become comfortable with math?
That's a great question. It's not unlike reading. And, there was a study of young children, preschool children, on what is the biggest predictor of math success in the elementary grade. And they found for children that the biggest predictor was not what one would think, that it was this ability to tell a narrative that's tied in with the idea of reading and being able to write a story. But if you think about it, people think about math as, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And what I say is, no, those are tools. Those are just the tools. Math is a problem-solving tool, the problem-solving piece, and the tools that you are learning is so that you can problem solve. So, the idea that parents are reading with their kids and developing this creativity really lends itself to the creativity that is necessary in math. Being able to construct a problem, because when we, become adults, we're not doing textbook math. We are trying to figure out, how many gallons of paint do I need to purchase to paint my downstairs, right? We're trying to figure out all of these things. That is problem solving and creativity. And so, the piece that happens is, and like you mentioned earlier, when people are pulling out their calculators to do the tip, they understand the concept of the tip. They just never mastered the tools for doing it. So, at least at the elementary level, so much of math is developing and really mastering the tools. I say, like, if you're, a carpenter, you have to master, how you use a hammer and nail. Like, that you have to master these small things to be able to build a house. And so if parents and if individuals can think about math as there are the tools that you need in your toolkit for solving problems, and the math is actually solving the problem. The math is what is the problem that presents you, and what tools do you have to solve it. It's very much like reading.
Yeah. Now, going back to that calculator, I was at a dinner one night with somebody, and this person across from me said, "Oh, it's so ridiculous that we torture kids with math. Why do kids need to learn how to do math? They can pull out their phone. There's a calculator. We don't need to learn this stuff anymore." And I thought that was one of the most incredibly dumb things I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to start a fight at the dinner table either, but I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the words to kind of come back. You do. What would you have said to that person?
So, for my PhD, I interviewed kids in math and, just had them talk to me. And I would tell them, I don't care if you get the answer right or wrong. I just want to know what you're thinking. But what was so interesting is that I would talk to kids and ask them problems, and they would say, if I had a calculator, I could solve this problem. And so I have this wonderful video of a student who I said, well, what would you do if you had a calculator? And there was a whiteboard in the room. And so she drew the calculator on the wall. And she said, this is what I would do. I would press this, and then I would do this. And then I would say, well, what if all the calculators were broken in the building and you didn't have one? How would you approach this problem? And she was completely stuck. But the other piece is, so that response is similar to, I say to people, well, what if kids don't have sight word recognition? Because you could say, well, they have a dictionary. You can just look up the words. You don't need that. And they get to, a book, and they don't know, 50% of the words in the book they can't read on sight. They have to sound them out, right? But you say, oh, no problem. You could use a dictionary, to do that. That makes no sense. And, when we do our math magic shows, one of the things that we do is this race against the calculator. And we have parents come up and they have to do this one problem. And we're like, okay, you get your calculator to solve this problem. And then we have kids who then they're blindfolded so they can't see the problem in advance. It's a series of numbers that like 10 numbers have to be added up. And they're blindfolded. And then we give the parent, we're like, we're giving you a head start. Like start doing it on the calculator. And then we take the kids' blindfolds off and they look at the problem and they can do it instantly. It's critical for kids to have that kind of fluency and automaticity, automatic recall for them to do any kind of higher level problem solving and thinking. So I hope that gives some kind of ammunition for you the next time you hear something
Absolutely,
like that.
Absolutely. And, it's people know that I've been doing educational magic shows for years and years. What I don't often tell people is that a lot of those mind reading, predict the future kind of things I do on stage, it's all math. It's all math tricks.
Right. And you know what's so interesting, because we do a math magic show play every year, and for our younger kids, they learn the same math tricks every year. But by 4th and 5th grade, we're like, okay, you've been doing these math tricks for 3 or 4 years now. Now you're going to learn why they work. And so there's a part of our play where our 4th and 5th graders will come out on stage and they'll say, any questions? And the parents will say, teach us how to do the calendar math trick, or teach us what you did with that calculator trick. And they'll talk about the math behind it. But what that does for kids, and I have noticed this, is that once you connect the math that they're doing to this, that there is a reason behind it, they start looking for those reasons. They start looking for why it works. And that's where we want to get kids. That's like, you've got it once you get kids saying, wait a minute, I know that there is a reason why, and I'm going to start figuring that out.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited. This sounds like a great club for kids to be in. Now, you were saying before the pandemic, you were a brick and mortar store club in Philadelphia, but the pandemic came along and you guys had to pivot. That word that we've all listened to, pivot. And for you, it turned out to be a good pivot because now you can serve everyone.
Yeah, it did. And it also, made us really think deeply about how we kind of standardize our practice. We were a small place. I had great, amazing teachers. They knew what they were doing. But now as we're expanding, we had to really think about, okay, how do we keep math engaging and fun and be able to, scale this in a way that meets our goals, which is to build joyful, confident, fearless math learners. And it made us, we had to dig deep. We had to really rethink a lot of things and then put it out there. But I feel like we are much better than pre-pandemic, with the exception that I would still love to be able to have kids to put on a play or do a mathathon. But in terms of the daily math club work that we do, I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. Well, where can people go to find out more about Trapezium and possibly how they can get their kids involved?
Absolutely. We are at trapeziummath.com. That's like a trapezoid, TRAPEZIUM math.com. And all of the information about how to sign up for a club. We also have something called Dinner Table Math, and those are activities and games that parents can do. We used to always do math at the dinner table, which is how it came up, but can do it at any place, anywhere, anytime, that are not intimidating for parents to do. So they are fun games and activities that parents can do with their children to build joyful math experiences with their children.
And, this is just such another great reminder, and this is something that I tell parents, especially young parents. You are your child's first and most important teacher.
Yeah.
Because what is important to you is going to become important to your kids. And
Absolutely.
having, basic math skills, being able to read, and now throw in understanding how to code. These are all really important skills that are going to serve our kids in great ways as they grow up. So I'm really excited that Trapezium is available for families.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
Yeah. We've had a great time talking about the joy of math with our guest, the founder of Trapezium Math, Dr. Angela McIver. Dr. Angela, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Hans Kohlberg. He'll be here to celebrate Baby Aviva, Orangutan Diva. That's the next episode of the podcast. Hey, if you're the author of a fantastic children's book, please do visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to find out how we can help you let the world know about your fantastic children's book. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Angela McIver from Trapezium Math, the online math club. Also want to thank our sponsor, Ruth Malley, The Power of Kindness Through the Eyes of Children. Stunning children's picture book, a certified great read, a great addition to any family library. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Michael Murphy. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.